North Sentinel Island, the mystery of the last isolated tribe. North Sentinel Island is part of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean and is famous for being one of the last untouched places on Earth by the modern world. It is inhabited by the Sentinelese, one of the most isolated indigenous peoples in the world. Over the years, this island has become one of the most mysterious and impenetrable places on the planet due to the fierce resistance of its inhabitants to any form of external contact. The history of the island and its people is full of mysteries, tragedies, and failed attempts at contact that continue to fascinate and intrigue anthropologists and explorers. Before contact, the voluntary isolation of the Sentinelese. The Sentinelese have lived on the island for thousands of years, with their origins dating back to prehistoric times. It is believed they are among the first people to migrate from Africa, arriving in the Andaman Islands over 60,000 years ago. Apparently, the Sentinelese have always maintained a policy of total isolation, meaning that over the millennia, they have remained virtually unchanged by modernity. This has made the island one of the last bastions of primitive human life. They speak a unique language, unknown even to other Andamanese peoples, and their population is estimated to be between 50 and 150 individuals. Almost nothing is known about their customs, social organization, or way of life, as any attempt at approach is met with hostility. The few pieces of information about the Sentinelese have been gathered from long-distance observations. Early attempts at contact. The 19th and early 20th century. The first attempts to contact the Sentinelese occurred in the 19th century when the British began colonizing the Andaman Islands. In 1880, an expedition led by British officer Maurice Vidal Portman attempted to land on North Sentinel Island. They managed to capture an elderly couple and a few children with the intention of studying them. However, the elderly couple soon died from diseases contracted from the British, and the children were returned to the island. This was one of the earliest examples of how contact with outsiders could be fatal to the Sentinelese, who had no immunity to diseases from the outside world. Subsequent attempts to contact the tribe, made in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, were equally unsuccessful. The Sentinelese continued to reject any approach with violence, shooting arrows at boats and helicopters that came near their shores. The 1970s and 1980s. Observing from a distance in the 1970s and 1980s, there were renewed attempts to contact the Sentinelese, but with a more cautious approach. India's National Institute of Oceanography began organizing visits to the island with anthropologists, bringing gifts like coconuts and metal tools in the hope of initiating peaceful dialogue. On several occasions, the Sentinelese accepted the gifts, but most of the time, they rejected them and maintained their aggressive stance. In 1974, a documentary crew attempted to film the Sentinelese for a National Geographic production, but the team was met with arrows. The film director was shot in the leg with a poisoned arrow, and the project was abandoned. Despite these efforts, it became clear that the Sentinelese had no interest in any form of contact with the outside world and preferred to continue living in isolation. The 2004 tsunami. A miraculous survival. On December 26, 2004, a devastating tsunami, triggered by a 9.1 magnitude underwater earthquake, hit much of the Indian Ocean, killing hundreds of thousands of people across several countries. The Andaman Islands, including North Sentinel Island, were directly affected by the disaster. After the tsunami, Indian authorities and rescue teams feared that the Sentinelese had been wiped out, as North Sentinel Island is relatively low in elevation, making it vulnerable to large waves. Indian Navy helicopters were sent to fly over the island to check for survivors. When the helicopters approached, the Sentinelese appeared on the beaches, shooting arrows at the aircraft as they had done before. This display of hostility was ironically seen as a sign that the tribe had survived the disaster. To this day, it remains a mystery how the Sentinelese managed to survive such a catastrophic event. Some experts speculate that, having lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years, the Sentinelese may have recognized the warning signs of the approaching tsunami, such as the sudden receding of the ocean, and fled to higher ground before the waves hit. The John Allen Chau incident, the 2018 tragedy, one of the most tragic and widely publicized events related to North Sentinel Island, occurred in 2018 when American missionary John Allen Chau attempted to enter the island to convert the Sentinelese to Christianity. Chau, a young adventurer and fervent religious believer, felt his life's mission was to bring the word of God to isolated tribes, and he viewed the Sentinelese as a group in need of salvation, defying Indian laws that strictly prohibit any attempt to contact the Sentinelese. Chau paid local fishermen to take him illegally to the island. In November 2018, he made his first attempt to land on the island, bringing gifts and a Bible. He was immediately met with hostility, being attacked with arrows and forced to retreat. Despite this, Chau persisted. In one of his final diary entries, he wrote that he was prepared to die for his cause. The next day, he returned to the island and was attacked again. This time, he did not escape. Witnesses reported seeing the Sentinelese dragging his body along the beach. His remains were never recovered. The incident sparked a global controversy, with many questioning the ethics of Chau's missionary efforts and his disregard for the laws protecting the Sentinelese. The tragedy also reignited debates about the need to protect isolated tribes from external influences that could be deadly to their survival. Legal and international protection. India has adopted a strict policy of protection for North Sentinel Island. In addition to banning any form of contact, the government has established a 5-kilometer exclusion zone around the island to ensure that the Sentinelese are not disturbed. This includes prohibiting boats, planes, and helicopters from flying or sailing near the island. These measures are seen as essential to ensuring the survival of the Sentinelese and protecting their unique and vulnerable culture. Beyond legal protection, there is a consensus among anthropologists and scholars that the Sentinelese should be left alone. Any contact with the modern world could have devastating consequences for them, both in terms of health, due to exposure to diseases for which they have no immunity, and in terms of cultural disruption. Conclusion: the last untouched people, North Sentinel Island and its inhabitants, remain one of the great mysteries of the modern world. While most of the planet becomes increasingly interconnected and globalized, the Sentinelese continue to live as their ancestors did for thousands of years, with no influence from the outside world. The future of the island and its people is uncertain. With the advancement of technology and exploration, pressure on remote territories increases. However, the current protection policies appear to be an essential step to ensure that the Sentinelese can continue living in isolation, as they have for generations. The 2004 tsunami and the tragic events surrounding John Allen Chau serve as reminders that North Sentinel Island is not just a geographical location, but a symbol of the struggle for cultural preservation, resistance, and self-determination. The story of this isolated tribe, which has survived natural disasters and external threats, is a testament to the resilience of humanity in its most primitive and essential forms.